testing.
You can let Jeff and then no for the Q&A.
Test 1 2 test 1 2. Sounds good.
All right. Hello, everyone. I guess we'll get started, and then we'll keep letting people in as they come in if anyone else comes. So welcome, everyone, to our Affirming Committee Education session. Today, we have Ann Bradley, Reverend Martha Martin, and Julie Johnson from Bethany United, and MJ Lang, Sarah Martin, and Ian Reed from St. Luke's United. They are here to speak to us about their process of becoming an affirming church and what it looks like now in their community. We at Hillside United hope that we can all learn things to bring on our journey to becoming an affirming church. Thank you to all of you for coming and speaking to us. And we will also have a Q&A at the end after their presentations. And then after the session, we also have a few snacks and drinks at the back, if anyone would like to get some throughout. So, who would like to go first? Oh, yes. So the bathrooms are downstairs, which you can access through going down the elevator on this side or the stairs. And if you just go down the stairs all the way, they're on the left. So we have the hand mic, or you can go up to there.
I think, yeah. So just up to that mic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys can go up there.
Hi, folks. Thanks for inviting us to share our story at Bethany, and just sort of to set the context. I'm a supply minister. I came in August of 24 for 1 year, which has turned into 2 years. And so I came in just kind of at the tail end of this process. So the way we've broken it up is I'm just going to give you a little bit of perspective of the kind of 6 months before we took the vote when I came. And then Julie is going to give you some personal reflections about her experience being on the Affirming Committee, and then Anne, who is the Congregational Engagement and Community Outreach staff person at Bethany, is going to give you a broader sense of the timeline, and because it was a whole 2-year process, so I really feel like I just kind of came in kind of at the end of things. And I'm borrowing heavily from a sermon that I offered on December the 8th, 2024, which was the date of our affirming vote, no pressure at all. It was received well, and so I figured what I would do at that time was kind of to set a bit of a United Church context and a theological context as well. So, a number of years ago, I learned about a practice called used to thinks that was helpful sometimes when telling children's stories. And I actually think it's helpful for folks of all ages. And the example I usually give when explaining it is I used to think that God was an old white man sitting on a cloud making judgments and causing things to happen randomly. Now I think that God is both male and female, or neither male nor female, and more like energy and spirit and love moving in and through the world. Or another example might be that I used to hate beets until well into my adulthood, and now I quite like them. As someone who has devoted much of the last 40 years to the philosophy of lifelong learning, I think that one should have used to thinks all the time. I used to think that I didn't like preaching, but I have found that actually, despite my protestations in the early days of my ministry and my firm belief that it's really not the best way for people to learn new things, and my great wailing and gnashing of teeth about it on Saturday evenings, I have found that I quite enjoy preaching, mostly. I have learned so much about our biblical story and myself in the years since I've been preaching every week, and as an educator at heart, I love to pass what I have learned on to others. I used to think that Jesus was a white man, but I understand now that he was a Middle Eastern person of color, part of an oppressed and marginalized group. The United Church of Canada is full of used to thinks. Over the course of its 100 years, it's actually acknowledged and apologized for its wrongdoing in the past, asking forgiveness for harm done. At our 1986 General Council, our moderator, Right Reverend Bob Smith, delivered an apology to Indigenous people for its role in Indian residential schools and for trying to make you like us. And in doing so, we helped to destroy the vision that made you what you were. Since 2008, the United Church of Canada has been actively engaged in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada and in building right relationships with Indigenous peoples. In 2006, the United Church of Canada apologized to the women affected by disjoining, which was the practice of forcing members of the UCC Deaconess Order who married to resign from membership and the order. A lot of people don't know that. They were also removed from the profession. This practice continued until 1960 when it was finally overturned. In the 2020 adoption apology, the United Church of Canada apologized for our regretful and damaging role in pressured, coerced, or forced adoptions, saying we sincerely apologize for our role in the participation in the separation of mothers from their children. Our role in pressured, coerced, or forced adoptions created a legacy of pain and suffering. We helped create a culture of shame. The great poet and civil rights activist Maya Angelou said, "Do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, be better." I admire the United Church of Canada for acknowledging its complicity in systems that caused harm to so many and for trying to do better. And it continues to challenge itself by producing resources and hosting educational events and training to its communities of faith to work towards becoming inclusive, anti-racist, and welcoming to all. Sometimes folks ask about the affirming process. Why do we have to be so upfront about it? We already welcome everybody. Isn't that enough? Why do we have to single out one group of people? While we like to think that we are welcoming to everyone, history tells us that the Christian church over 2,000 years has not, sadly. In fact, the Christian church has often been quite hateful towards certain groups of people. So let me tell you a story. For many years, I was a university chaplain at 2 universities here in Halifax for a total of about 14 years, both at Mount St. Vincent University and at Dalhousie University. And a number of times I would have students in my office asking me, in confidence and these might be international students as well, if there was a Christian church where they might go in the city where they wouldn't hear hate and judgment preached at them because they were gay or lesbian. Because that's what they were used to hearing when they went to church. And at that time, there were only 2 United churches in Halifax that would hear words like, God loves you, you are safe here. And they were St. John's United and Bedford United. I wish I could say that the larger societal context is better now. I wish I could say that we didn't need congregations to be affirming anymore. But sadly, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that things are, in fact, getting worse. In September of 2023, our then moderator, Right Reverend Carmen Lansdowne, wrote this on her social media page. It's been a very upsetting week for many of us who claim the title Christian. I watched in horror on my social media pages as colleague after colleague recounted the vitriolic hatred they received this past Wednesday when they gathered together and dared to publicly and peacefully confront protests organized across the country. These protests, under the guise of protecting children and parents' rights, were in reality promoting hatred, misunderstanding, and misinformation against the 2S LGBTQIA community. And it's all done under the banner of religion. Many of my colleagues, this is still Carmen talking, myself included, are struggling as we know that our faith calls us to live lives of forgiveness, compassion, and grace towards those with whom we disagree. And yet this is what folks encountered as they ventured out to take part in the counter-protests. One colleague said that someone said to her, "You're not a pastor, you're a joke, is what you are." Sadly, these incidents are still happening 3 years later, not just in the United States, but right here in Canada, in Halifax. This, folks, is why congregations need to be public, intentional, and explicit about who we welcome. So I'm going to turn it over to Julie now.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank Hillside for inviting Bethany to share with you today on our journey. And we had a little planning meeting last week and we kind of divvied up what we were going to talk about. And I guess my job is to provide some personal stories that provide a framework of why I became interested in and focused on the affirming process within Bethany. So I'm going to tell a few stories, and they span about 40 years, but I promise I'm not going to tell them in real time. I'll try to be concise. So the first story I want to tell is about a young couple that went to the church that I attended in, let's say, beginning of the 80s. Married, had 2 children. Marriage started to crumble. He came out. They decided they'd try to live in an open marriage. Well, that didn't work. So the wife quietly disappeared to another part of the province, and the husband was in Halifax and part of the gay scene in the 80s. Now, the thing we have to remember is the 1980s was the height of the AIDS pandemic or epidemic, whichever way you want to frame it. Unfortunately, he became ill. He used to call me periodically to talk. He was from a fine Christian family, but he just couldn't live the lie anymore and did come out. One Sunday during the Christmas season when he was extremely ill, he showed up at our church for a Sunday morning service. I think he really wanted to experience the magic of Christmas one more time. I was the only person in the entire congregation that spoke to him. I went up to him, I gave him a kiss and a hug, and I sat with him during service. After church, at my in-laws' dining room table, I was accused of putting our entire family at risk because I hugged and sat with a gay man and openly showed support for him. Broke my heart. It just shows that day and age, the fear and the lack of education around the entire community. So we're going to move along now, probably, I'd say 90s. My best friend since I've been 8 years old is a lady named Pat, from a strong Catholic background, and I'm from a strong Baptist background, so we shouldn't even have known each other, let alone be best friends, because the city that we lived in had a parochial school system. So we never would have crossed paths except for the Y. And we went to Y summer camp together and became really, really good friends, a friendship that is still current. And as teenagers, we worked at the Y in a Leader Corps program. After university, Pat did the usual thing. She got married, had a couple of kids, was in an abusive relationship, which she finally ditched after about 12 years, and made the choice to be a single mom bringing up her 2 daughters. She traveled quite often with work and would often be in Halifax, and we always got together. So one night, we had a date to get together, and as soon as she walked in the door, I knew there was something she wanted to talk about. Took, well, better than 2 hours before she finally got her story out and came out to me, and I was the first person that she had ever come out to, that she had met this woman through work that lived in Toronto. They were having a long-distance relationship, yada, yada, yada. So, of course, there were tears, hugs, kisses, so happy for her. And I said, Pat, how come it took you like 2 hours to get this out? She said, because I was afraid you wouldn't love me anymore. Move on from that. She and Judy got married at our home and have been together for over 30 years. Judy now has dementia. They have relocated to Ontario to be closer to the girls. And I visited them just before Christmas, and even though it's kind of rough with Judy with dementia, the love is still there. I'm going to try and get a little bit faster now. We had a safe space policy at Nova Scotia Community College, and my office and 2 colleagues in our department were the safe spaces. And we had one young man whose partner died very suddenly. He was gay, he was also Indigenous, who hung around in our office a lot. We arranged it, he asked for, and we arranged that he do his work experience through our youth department on a national project. He wrote and put together curriculum for youth at risk, delivered that curriculum to the youth in Annapolis County, was a valedictorian that year of his graduating class, and during his speech said that NSCC saved his life by providing safe space and the project and the opportunity to be the best that he could be. My last story is one that has caused me to actually leave the Baptist denomination. We lived in Paradise for over 20 years, and we had a lovely little village church that was just middle of the road, one not too far left, not too far right, everybody got along. Anyway, our liberal pastor left, there was the search. We ended up with a more conservative minister than I think anybody was really expecting. We also had some people move into the community that were extremely conservative. Although United Baptist churches are part of the Atlantic Baptist Convention, each individual church holds its own constitution and can change that constitution with a vote by its membership. It was put forward by the conservative contingent of the congregation to change the Constitution so that gays and lesbians were not welcome in our congregation. I could not, in all conscience, go to a church where my best friend and her partner could not come to church. I have two gay couple cousins that are married that came to visit. I always went to Pat's church when we were in New Brunswick. She always came to our church with Judy. Anyway, I made the decision to leave. It did pass, and the membership that voted against the change in Constitution were harassed by the deacons and the new minister. As a result, the church split. The more liberal people going to a more middle-of-the-road church in another town. Within the 5 or 6 years of the split, the church closed. It is now a dormitory for foreign workers during the summertime. So those are some of the reasons along the way why I've been involved with the Affirm United movement. One thing I'd like to just leave with you to ponder that you might want to consider as you're going down on your journey is a friend of mine who's a retired minister posed a question one time during a faith study, and the question posed was, so do you think that if a person is gay, lesbian, two-spirit, da-da-da-da-da, that they can't have a personal relationship with God? Thank you.
Thank you, Martha and Julie. Martha says she came in at the end of our affirming process, but she was a huge support, and Julie was very, very active during those 2 years as a very dedicated member of our affirming committee. And my name is Ann Bradley. I'm the community engagement facilitator at Bethany, and I was the staff liaison person for the committee, so also very, very involved. And so what I'm going to do for you now, as I know this was important to us as a committee, we had to figure out what we were called to do and how we were going to do that. And so I'll take you through a timeline of our affirming journey, and then later on I'm sure there'll be a time for questions, and hopefully we'll be able to answer them. So Bethany's affirming journey began on Pentecost Sunday in June of 2022, when our lead minister at that time asked those attending our worship service to write a vision for Bethany, providing each of us an opportunity to discern a path forward for our faith community. And the desire to explore becoming an affirming church came out of this visioning exercise. So it was forwarded to Bethany's Community Connections Working Group, and in October of 2022, a subcommittee was formed to further research this concept, guided by the United Church of Canada's Affirm United mandate. So following the protocol of Bethany's governance structure, the subcommittee wrote a proposal that Bethany Church begin the affirming process and presented this to the governing boards, and it was approved unanimously. So the Affirming Working Group, I'll refer to it as the AWG, was formed in January of 2023, and we were 6 members plus myself as a staff liaison. So the AWG met regularly for about 3 months to research and to better understand the process and the work that we were called to do, using the Affirm United Open Hearts resource as our main source of information. We also connected and met with the Atlantic Canada and Quebec representative for Affirm United at the time, which was Reverend Kim Curlett. And Kim offered us much support to our working group and congregation throughout the 2-year process. We also had conversations with folks from other affirming congregations and attended relative UCC webinars. We as a working group wrote our own terms of reference and mission statement. This was really important to us to maintain our purpose and values. We also created a confidential email address so we could be contacted by anyone who had questions or concerns. We set up an Affirming web page on our website with relative information regarding upcoming events and learning sessions, as well as links to resources. And we still have this web page with current information and photos of our Affirming journey. I see St. Luke's had some lovely photos up here. Ours are all on our website, so you can take a peek at that. We had an Affirming bulletin board and suggestion box, and we kept up regular communication with the congregation through weekly Sunday bulletins and emails, including handouts of Affirming flyers, posters, etc. And I saw when I came in that you had a really great display of some resources at the back of your sanctuary. So that's really important to stay connected with the congregation. Once we finally felt that we had gained enough information as a committee and insight, we were comfortable to offer our first congregational learning event. That was in May of 2023. So we spent almost really up to 5 months planning for that first event with guest speaker Reverend Ivan Gregan. He was the minister at the time of Port Wallace United Church who had become Affirming. And the topic for the evening was, why become Affirming? We showed a few short videos and music that supported our theme, and Reverend Gregan spoke about the rainbow as a symbol of our Christian faith, the colors. He talked about the colors of the liturgical year and the relevancy to becoming an Affirming ministry. In October of 2023, members of our committee attended a roundtable discussion and training session at St. Andrew's United Church in aid of supporting and meeting the needs of the 2S LGBTQ+ community, which was part of the work of Reverend Sean Friday and his team who created the Pride Place document, which some of you may be familiar with. Due to questions and concerns raised over the summer months and early fall, our working group hosted an open discussion on the Affirming journey for our congregation in late October. Reverend Kim Curlett was our guest speaker, and I want to say that some of you may know this, that back in 1988, there was a decision made by the United Church of Canada to ordain gay ministers at the time. And Bethany was a church that decided to go against that decision, and they actually formed an alliance. They were with the National Alliance of Covenanting Congregations. So Bethany, for many years, was part of this alliance. We haven't been for many, many years. We've been performing same-gender marriages long before we became an Affirming church. But that just gives you an idea that some of our congregation members were still dealing with a lot of the hurt and the pain and the division that caused back in 1988. So there were a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, and a lot of educating that we felt needed to be done. So one of the ways to do that was to have open discussions so that people could ask their questions. Also in October, a subcommittee of our working group worked very diligently to apply for a Seeds of Hope grant through the United Church of Canada Foundation. So in December of 2023, we received $1,000 through the Peace and Justice Endowment Fund, and these funds were used to offer honorariums for guest speakers and other resources that we purchased on our journey. So then in January of 2024, for the next 3 months, January, February, and March, we offered a series of personal storytelling. So in January, we had an evening of sharing by members of our congregation who are part of the queer community, and also with Kathy Kolajkovo from Port Wallace United Church, and she shared her family's story. And these stories were extremely moving and heartfelt. In February, we had Reverend Sean Friday, a United Church minister and gay activist, shared with us his personal personal story and the work he does within the United Church of Canada. And Patricia Neves also joined Reverend Sean that evening, and they shared their report called Pride Place, which summarizes the work that St. Andrews has done in Halifax in October of 2023, consulting with the 2S LGBTQIA community in Nova Scotia to find out what the community needs to feel safe and supported by the Christian church. And then in March, we had Tamsin Robson come, and Tamsin did a two-part series. The first part was with their mother, Kathleen Robinson. She told the story of her child, Tamsin, from a parent's perspective, and Tamsin's partner, Alexina St. Pierre, shared her story as well as a two-spirit person. And then Tamsin came back a week later with part 2 of this event and explored the theology and spirituality of gender itself. And we also offered a faith study by our lead minister on a book entitled Transgender, the Bible and the Lies of Transgender Christians by Austin Hartka, which was actually a really very informative, very well-written, easy-to-read book. I would highly recommend it. And then that May, we offered Words of Affirmation. We showed a National Film Board of Canada documentary entitled In Other Words, followed by discussion and a visioning exercise to begin revision of Bethany's visioning statement. The AWG continued to meet through June to plan for the fall, and during the summer, some of our members went to a number of events at other congregations. One was at Bedford United. We saw a documentary film entitled 1946, and when Martha came on board, she invited us to go over to St. James United, and we saw a play called The Laramie Project at St. James United in Dartmouth. So St. James offers their sanctuary to the Dartmouth Players, a community theater group, as a safe space for performances, and that's part of their call to action as an affirming ministry. And also the chair of St. James Affirming Committee, Ian Travers, had joined us one Sunday morning in the spring during our worship service and sort of did an interview-style sermon with our minister at the time about their affirming story. So it was really great to have the support of many different congregations and people who were going through or had gone through the same process. The final draft mission and vision statement, as well as our existing equal marriage policy and a required affirming action plan, was drafted by the AWG and sent to Affirm United Regional Coordinator Reverend Kim Curlett for approval, and as required prior to Bethany being authorized to ask the congregation to vote on becoming an affirming ministry. So those documents, as you know, all have to be in place and approved beforehand. These documents were then brought to our governing board for approval and authorization to put the mission and vision statements to a congregational vote. And our very last event before we took that vote was in November of 2024. We had invited the Women Next Door Choir, and they are a lesbian choir here in Halifax, and they gave an uplifting and just beautiful inspirational performance as our last event in the affirming process. So we celebrated that occasion by serving pie to emphasize the need to be public, intentional, and explicit in our ministry of affirmation. So the Sunday finally came for the day of our vote. That was December 8th in 24. 2 congregational votes were held following worship. Both the affirming mission and vision statements were approved for adoption, and the congregation voted in favor of Bethany becoming an affirming ministry. And I will never forget that day as long as I live. It was very, very emotional. And knowing Bethany's past history and all the steps and the journey that we had taken to get to that point, it was overwhelming, it was joyful, and it was very, very meaningful for all of us as a congregation. And then on Sunday, January 19th, our worship service was an affirming celebration. It was an uplifting and heartfelt service with beautiful music, powerful testimonies of inclusion, love, and justice for all. And we were especially pleased to have many folks who supported us along the way join us for this special celebration, and continue to be grateful to Affirm United and the UCC Foundation for their support. And I would like to say that one of those people who joined us on that Sunday morning celebration was Brenda, as a representative of the foundation. So we were just very, very grateful for everyone who showed their support. So during the past 3 years, our Affirming ministry has been and is an integral part of worship and the life and work of Bethany. Through prayers, acknowledgement of days of recognition, Pride worship services, Pride parades, Pi Day services, Pi Day activities, eating lots of pie, and awareness. So our Pi Day activities, we've highlighted and brought an awareness and support of Dal Out and the Camp Kidston Kaleidoscope Camp. We've had film nights during Pride Week. We connect with other Affirming congregations through the Affirming Ministry Cluster Group of HRM United Churches, and by connecting with various 2S LGBTQ+ communities to find ways to be of support. Our Affirming working group was dissolved, and Bethany's Social Justice Learning and Action Working Group was formed, and the Affirming Ministry and Affirming Action Plan is part of their mandate. So we celebrated our first anniversary of being an Affirming ministry on January 18th, this past January of 2026, when the return of the Women Next Door choir came during our morning worship service with songs and stories of inspiration. And most recently, the Social Justice Working Group purchased freestanding pull-up banners for use throughout our building with graphics, which include a rainbow cross, the UCC crest, and Affirm United logo. One of them reads, "God's love opens hearts, minds, and doors," and the other says, "Living more fully into God's way of welcome, love, and justice." And we are doing just that as we continue our Affirming journey, as we listen and respond to the heart of the Spirit within us. So I just want to thank you for inviting us here today. I hope that what we've offered has been an inspiration to you and will help guide you along your way. And I want to thank you for taking this step and for doing the work that you are doing.
I thought I'd be a little closer to you. First of all, I want to thank all three of you from Bethany. I wasn't quite certain of what the sequence was going to be. Can you not hear me? Trying to eat it. Okay. Yes. Thanks. Well, why did you sit so far back? I'm teasing. But I wanted to thank those from Bethany because you really have set the stage, everything from where we were many decades ago, some of the powerful human experiences that you've experienced personally along the way, and then clearly, ambitiously and actively what you've done in the last 3 years to get to where you are. And I congratulate you on what you have done. I think many of the Affirming congregations would have fairly similar stories of the process. And at St. Luke's, the process began really before I became a member, and Sarah might comment about the year, but I think it was like 2014. There was some sort of talking about it, but it gained some momentum with the formation of an Affirming committee shortly before COVID, and of course, so many things came to an abrupt halt. But then the momentum resumed once COVID was over and we were able to congregate together. And St. Luke's will be celebrating its 3rd anniversary as an Affirming congregation this June. I think all of us could probably tell stories of our own personal growth and experience, those of us who are old enough to know what things were like back in the 70s and 80s. And most of these stories are very powerful, and some of them are heartbreaking. Just for a moment, if any of you who are here who have a personal experience with, in your own family or a close friend, that really fits with this story, that motivates you to be here. Just put your hand up if you've actually had something personal that motivates you to be here and having this discussion. Yeah. Well, that just shows how widespread and ubiquitous these realities are, although we don't necessarily hear about them within our churches as often directly, but when we get together in small groups or one-on-one, some of these stories and experiences come. Very briefly, I'm a physician, retired, and I do remember very, very well the lead up to the Victoria Conference in 1988. And the process of consultation that took place over several years beforehand. And I remember attending a very large gathering from Presbytery at Trinity United Church in Charlottetown. The place was full. And there were several people who stood up and very clearly stated that in their view, HIV was God's punishment for the horrendous travesty of being gay. That's where we started in 1986, and I actually personally stood up and what you might call vigorously objected to that. But that was where some people were at, because at that time it was a gay man's disease. And then I felt compelled to do my own research, because I knew very little as far as I was concerned. In high school, I didn't even have a gay friend. However, in retrospect, there are 3 or 4 who were good friends of mine that absolutely were gay, but I just was too oblivious to it. So I did some research and this is what physicians typically do. You hit the literature and you try to find out where's the science behind this. And there was some good science that showed that, in fact, that queer behavior often started right shortly after birth, may even be hormonal in the womb. And the one thing that was very clear, it was not a choice. It was not a personal choice. In fact, at that time in the 80s, it was such a horrendous life you were choosing, no one in their right mind would have chosen to live that lifestyle. But, and over the course of being a physician, I've had to learn a lot about my own unconscious biases, and I'm humbled to say that there are times when I really didn't understand, and when I was faced with a patient of mine that was flamboyantly gay, I was not comfortable, particularly when we talked about human sexuality issues, because as a urologist, that's a core topic. Fast forward to now, our Affirming committee was a group of very committed, motivated people, very similar to all of you who've also had a personal experience that makes them feel that for me to be Christian, I am compelled to learn and to open my heart and to vigorously support this kind of process. We were blessed by the fact that amongst the leadership on this committee, we had, first of all, Reverend Rick Gunn, who many of you may know of, who is a gifted minister, a wonderful musician, and is gay. Although he would say he's gay light, is what he's said. But nonetheless, he is openly gay and is very thoughtful and humble in educating us. And here I was, after 38 years as a surgeon, I thought I was reasonably well educated. And I have learned a lot since joining the Affirming committee. I won't go over some of the processes that we went through during the preliminary before we became affirming because, first of all, I think the experiences are very similar to what you nicely described. So I'm taking this a little bit more from now we are affirming, what now? So this actually segues very nicely, Amber, the way it's the sequence of presentations. And with me today are Sarah and MJ, who are both pivotal parts of our Affirming Committee, and I'm sure that they will be quite happy to share some of their own reflections. Could I have the first slide? Okay. That's the first thing you see on the right-hand side. Our large Affirming United crest is what you see as soon as you enter the narthex of our church. On the outside of our church, there is a very large Affirm United crest that is on the front face, the face of the church that faces the street. Our flagpole always has the pride flag, the new pride flag, although today it's the orange flag because we had a session today on learning about our Mi'kmaq community, and but most of the time that flag flies. Anywhere there's communication in our correspondence, and whenever you see anything from an email from the office or from Reverend Rick, that passage, St. Luke's is an affirming ministry against racism and homophobia. And that is a subtext under the signature on everything that comes from St. Luke's. Next slide. As you did, we had to work hard at our mission and vision statement. These are always something that needs to be reviewed and updated and so on. And I can tell you there was a lot of wordsmithing that went on to do this. And some fairly passionate points of view. So our mission statement is relatively brief, and you can read it there. Together we are on a journey of Christian faith that calls us to discern and do actions that share God's love and help heal God's world. Discern and do are basic themes that permeate St. Luke's. Next slide. Our vision statement took a lot more work, and I won't go through it in detail because it's lengthy, but one of the things that we now are very aware, when we began the affirming process, it was really focused on the 2S LGBTQIA community. Now Affirm United has expanded and looked and to become even more inclusive, broadly inclusive, to include issues of racism, anything that excludes anyone from participation. So hence all of the inclusions, everything from color, ethnicity, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, age, ability, socioeconomic status, etc., etc. Next slide. So as those were, of course, submitted to Affirm United, they were approved, and then we were given the privilege of being able to use that crest. Next slide, please. Okay. I did have a look at what Amber had listed, and there was a very extensive list of things that you are actively doing. So there's a lot of similarities between what you're doing and what we've been doing. And I think the point which is probably self-evident to most of you is becoming affirming is not like passing a grade and you get the diploma and then you're done. It's the beginning of a commitment, a long-term commitment to the same energy, the same work, year after year after year. So much of what you did becoming affirming is going to be, I'm sure, continued in various permutations indefinitely. So Our mission and vision statements are everywhere. They are on our agenda at our council meetings. They are in framed documents in the narthex as you enter the church. They are on the bulletins. So those mission and vision statements are not like sometimes, and we can all relate to this in the past, they were developed, shelved, and dust collected on them for years, and nobody could quote them. So they're everywhere. We do try to live to the commitment of being public, intentional, and explicit. So it doesn't anywhere around the church, whether it be the flags or the poster, or inside the church as soon as you come in, there is evidence of welcoming examples, pride flags, various documents that are there for reading purposes. That we hope that the moment that someone enters the front door of the church, that they have a sense that they can be comfortable being there. Of course, there's an annual commitment to maintain a subscription to Affirm United, and that gives you access to their website, which, of course, provides all sorts of very useful resources and materials. One of the pleasures of being on the Affirming Committee, and as you always engage whenever there's a pie day, and we have an absolutely wonderful baker in Sarah who continues to amaze us and overindulge us in wonderful pies of every imaginable type whenever we have Pie Day in March. We also, during the next slide, please. Okay. We have budgeted for at least 2 services a year to provide an honorarium for a special speaker, for a special event that reflects the goals and ambitions of our Affirming Committee. One of the distinct pleasures at St. Luke's is we, just like in Dartmouth, have been able to have a community theater group that has grown over about 18 years. Just as of last night, they had their first performance of 9 to 5, which is, remember the Dolly Parton film from 30 years ago. It was a musical, and I've been part of that community, that community players group in a small way, and I can tell you that it is a very much welcoming group of people of various ages, a number of people who are in the 2S LGBTQ community. We've had 2 young people who are transitioning, who are part of the troupe. And it's grown from over the years to be really a family. It's a very special place, and the players do a wonderful job. It's a real celebration, and that is very much supported by St. Luke's financially and logistically, administratively, and so on. So we have a safe space for people so inclined to be able to come. And we've done some fairly challenging presentations. Last year we did Rent. If any of you know the musical Rent, it's very raw, it's highly provocative, and it's evocative, and deals with the height of the AIDS crisis in downtown New York City within that community. Next slide. We also have been delighted to meet and become engaged with members of our local queer community. There are several who are in leadership who we have engaged with, and there are activities just in Little St. Margaret's Bay where we have tried to make sure we have a presence, and also, of course, when there's a Halifax Pride parade, St. Luke's has been very well represented in the Pride Parade. And there we go. Yeah. And if you look on the left picture, there's one of the sessions that we've had. There's usually 3 in a row, where we have taken specific topics that are relevant, and members of the committee have facilitated these discussions. Sometimes we've had a short video to watch. That picture on the left is actually in our sanctuary. And one of those cookies is actually one of Sarah's wonderful rainbow creations. So this is, instead of having some major event all the time, sometimes these short 30-minute sessions following a service continue to maintain exposure and momentum and education. Next. We also have a librarian on our committee, and with her advice and skills, we've been able to collect a number of books, varying from young children's books to youth books to very much adult books that are educational. And once a month, one of these books that MJ recommends is highlighted in the announcements, and people are encouraged to take them out and to learn on their own. Reverend Rick, when he does our time to play, is very thoughtful in terms of making sure that any of the books that he uses, if at all, are very much inclusive and where there's no serious issues of gender to the point where anyone might be uncomfortable. And working together with our Sunday school leadership, and that's MJ again, we try to make certain that anything that are principles and leading in are also followed through in the Sunday school and the young people's education as well. Next. Okay. That was actually the service that when we became officially affirming. Next slide. There's a craft that Sarah led that we did on one of the days that was an affirming Sunday. Next slide. Okay. One of the ways that we try to be public and intentional and explicit is anything that's happening within the church has to fit under the principles that we've established as what we stand for and also what we will not accept. And like every other church, none of us survive without additional income from rentals, and we have turned down rentals that have not clearly had a broadly inclusive and accepting policy, written or unwritten. So sometimes that means a loss of money, but we don't want anyone just happy to come in on a Sunday and feel comfortable. We want anyone who came into the church any day of the week, regardless of what was going on, and to meet people that are there and not feel in any way uncomfortable. So it's these questions are asked explicitly when it's appropriate. Okay. Back up. Nope, not quite. Back up again. Okay. And when we have a public event like our Christmas craft sale, we have a booth, and the booth will often be populated with all sorts of colorful things from rainbow candy canes and stickers, and there are usually a couple of us who will welcome conversations. It usually starts with giving a candy cane to a child, and then the child brings their parent over, and then you can get a conversation going. And we also have some for those who are still dealing with some of the classic offensive Old Testament passages that seem to justify anti-gay positions. We have some literature that explicitly goes through these and explains the other contexts of these things. And we had one pamphlet that contained all of the sayings in the Gospels from our Lord that were about US LGBTQ issues, and the pamphlet's blank. Next slide. Okay, and there's Sarah giving out stickers. Okay, next slide. And I talked to you about those educational sessions. We had one today where we had a wonderful representative to educate us about the history of Mi'kma'ki and what it truly means to be a treaty people. We had well over 40 people stayed after church in a circle, and we probably could have stayed and gone on for a lot longer, although we did because our chair committed to making this 30 minutes. So it's always good to leave them wanting more, and that was just an example. Okay, next. And there's, of course, if you can't find another incentive to come and listen to some of these sessions, come and look at some of the treats that Sarah prepares. Next. There, it's not a very good picture, but there's Reverend Rick Gunn in the left circle, on the right of the left circle, and then on the right you see Christopher Wilson, a wonderfully talented musician and actor who escaped COVID in Toronto, came and was our music director for 2 years. And that was also the day when we became Affirming, and he was certainly a very positive motivator behind that. And we have a very creative person who's in charge of our sanctuary decorating, and that's the Affirming crest that she made with some styrofoam and some pool noodles, but it worked out well. Next. Okay. The ongoing leadership of Reverend Rick cannot be understated. There are many times subtly during the services or interactions other times at committee meetings and so on where a very thoughtful, gentle pastoral care is present to help us along or to keep us, remind us periodically if there's something where we need to be better. And with our Affirming committee, as just all of you are here, there's nothing like personal motivation from having had experience to continue to motivate you to continue to make the work, get the work done. We all have difficulty populating committees. We've had no difficulty sustaining the membership of our Affirming committee because every single one has a reason why they're there, and they usually have a name on them. Okay. Next. You can't eat that, but that is a piece of art, again, by Sarah Martin. So her creativity is not just in her baking. That's a beautiful... How many butterflies are on that, Sarah? 958 handmade butterflies, and there is a light in the base of that. So when that's illuminated, it's stunning. It's stunning. And then you see the pride flag in the back. That's in the sanctuary. Next. These journeys have not been without some controversy. Fortunately, the pushback has really not been within the walls of the church. We have several people who come from a more traditional Baptist background who are now members of our congregation, and they are very thoughtful in engaging and learning. They may not necessarily be where all the Affirming committee are in that journey, but I think that they are still finding a place at St. Luke's that challenges them, but they still feel comfortable in their uncertainty. And no one is judging people who were earlier on the journey than others. So that is another theme, that no one is judged. We had one person throw a large rock through the front door of the church on one occasion, which certainly frightened the staff. Reverend Rick has had some emails. In fairness, the one I'm most familiar with was written by someone with a very, very traditional theological approach, and he was clearly not even on the journey. But he was thoughtful in what he outlined, all of the reasons theologically why he thought that Reverend Rick's lifestyle and our status in the community was an abomination. And Rick responded in a very thoughtful, pastoral way, and there was a two-way conversation. Now, it was clear at the end they were at an impasse, but at least there was an opportunity that he seized. But there really has been no pushback inside the church walls, in great contrast to before 1988, when we lost about 25% of United Church members during, excuse me. So, overall, we're now known, quotes unquote, as the gay church in St. Margaret's Bay, which is a label that we wear proudly. Next slide. So, now we continue the hard work. It's good to sort of feel you've made the achievement and you've become affirming, but that is a step, that's a milestone. But it's a continuous journey, and we continue to try to maintain that commitment and that energy that we committed to when we became affirming. So, with some pride, we do take this label of being the gay church in St. Margaret's Bay, and we flaunt it, and we are glad to be that group. We hope that we're going to be able to continue to grow to become a safe place, and be able to feel have some of these people who have been hurt will feel comfortable in coming into our midst. Were there any comments, Sarah or MJ, you wanted to add? Because unlike the three of you, I didn't have a written presentation. I just had some slides, so I wasn't quite so articulate.
We just recently have partnered with St. Margaret's Bay Pride as well, and we're hosting a gender-affirming clothing swap, which we're really excited about. We've got some local seamstresses who are going to come in and do on-site alterations to clothing, and it's shaping up to be a really great event. Anything else you can think of?
Well, I'll give a plug for it. We do have, Ian mentioned about our Affirming bookshare program, and yeah, it's that's often a good way to carry on your learning without being, having to be so engaged in a group. Some people like to take things slow. Yeah.
Just a fact, I did do an AI search on this issue. Apparently, about 20% of Nova Scotia United Churches are affirming, officially affirming. The national average is just over 10%. So that sort of gives you some sense that we're leading the way a little bit.
There's 28, last time I did the tally, 28 in Nova Scotia and 13 in Louisville.
Yeah, very good.
All right, thank you again. Does anyone have any questions for either Bethany or St. Luke's on their talks? No? Okay, that's okay too. Oh, yeah, all right.
Or contrary-minded people initially? Any of you?
Yeah, the question was, how difficult was it to deal with people who were asking difficult questions and conflict. I will be honest, we did have our fair share of that at Bethany, dealing with Bethany's past history. And as you said, that Reverend Rick had dealt with it very graciously and respected, theology, and we tried to do the same as a committee. We had some letters that were sent our way, some emails, with a very strong, small group of people who felt very strongly that this was not the approach that we should be taking at Bethany. And it was challenging. It was a very bumpy road in the beginning, and still right until the very end. There was a few people whose minds were just not going to be opened or changed. And we just tried to deal with that in the best way we could. We offered evenings of discussion. We brought actually people in to help us mediate and to answer those questions, because the committee always didn't feel like we had all of the answers or the knowledge or the capability to be able to deal with that. Martha was a huge support of that. Reverend Kevin Little was our minister at the time. He also, Reverend Kim Curlett came in, and a number of other people. So yes, you just try to deal with it the best you can, but in the end we realized that there really is a zero tolerance for that type of behavior, and enough is enough. And so, there were times where it felt like we really had to dig our heels in, and we tried to do it in the best way we could without becoming divisive, without trying to divide the congregation. And so in the end, we did come to a successful vote and became affirming. And I will be honest, there are a couple of people who have not returned to Bethany. But we are still this open and affirming congregation. We've made a new path and a new journey. And you just do the best that you can, but zero tolerance, and just knowing that you are doing this for what you believe is justice for all people. Yeah.
So we really, to my knowledge, have not had anyone that I can think of that we lost. However, we made a major step in a positive direction by being well along in the affirming process and calling Reverend Rick, who was openly gay. So that was, and he was resoundingly accepted. So the work was really done before he even became, and then he, in a very gentle but clear way, in his pastoral way, was able to bring people along, and at least rather than any judgment of people who were strongly objecting, leave space for people to grow, as long as they're willing to learn and to dialogue. If it's a one-way street and a condemnation and a statement that is irrefutable by someone whose position is so firmly established they're not reachable, the reality is that that's not the church for them.
I guess I just want to also say that there's a difference between expressing a difference of opinion and struggling and bad behavior. And the bad behavior needs to be called. It's hard, and it's challenging to do that with kindness. But that's why it takes a lot of people to kind of come together and say, no, we're not, and sometimes you have to go to the governing body and say, you need to step up and say, no, we're not accepting this. We've decided that this is, we've tried to be kind-hearted, but this is where we stand, and you can't. It borders on bullying sometimes, and it's not. I'm not singling out Bethany, it happens everywhere. And, you know, especially kind of financial bullying. I mean, it's real. And it's hard. It's hard.
Thank you for that. Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
The role of your clergy is vital in providing pastoral care and support, because thank you. The role of your clergy in providing leadership and pastoral care for people who are struggling with these issues is absolutely vital. And the one or two people that I'm aware of that still are struggling have had sessions together, just one-on-one. They've been treated in a very thoughtful, compassionate way. These people have learned to realize that they have things to learn, and there's other ways to look at things. So it's, you know, you don't want all of us are at different stages on this journey, and I have patience looking back to how did I see the whole picture 40 years ago and realize, I mean, I've been forced to come a long way. And not everybody has had the challenges professionally or personally that make them stop and think and learn. So we need to be patient with those people. On the other hand, as you were just saying, if people are in fact not only rigid in their views, but disruptive, that cannot happen. That can't happen.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? You good? Yes, I was going to say, well, thank you to our guest speakers for coming in. So as I said, there are some treats while you're heading out if you would like just to stop there or talk to any of us as well. Thank you for coming, everyone.
I'd also like to thank Bethany and St. Luke's for coming out and sharing your experiences with us and how, you know, becoming Affirming has impacted you. So this is really great. And I also want to thank Amber Thornton. She's our chair of our Affirming committee, and she's been doing all the work and gathering us all together here. And thank you for being here on the journey with us. And we're looking forward to what's next. So thank you. All right. Who's back there? That's right.